Your unprocessed pain is slowly killing you, but there's hope. Let's talk about it with Pat Morley on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And we're so glad you're here. That you would give an hour of a busy day to us is a high and holy compliment. You always have a place at our table. We just don't let you talk. And if you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is here, our executive producer. Matthew is about to launch a class for men, too. He'll teach guys how to get through the movie Rudy without crying.
Push the feelings down.
Real men don't cry.
That's right.
And our producer, Jeremy Birdsall, is in the little glass booth. Jeremy is so manly, he even looks tough eating a salad. And that's no mean feat. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John is also into essential oils, motor oil, midnight oil, bacon grease, WD-40. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George says beer too.
No,
beards are an acquired taste. So if you don't like them, acquire some taste. And Kathy is the soft, feminine side of the program. She is also a very good sport for being here on an episode that deals with mostly guys.
That's very true.
That is true. We are, generally when you're not here, we smoke cigars and do it in our underwear, but we can't do that when you're here. We have a great guest today. He's a longtime friend of mine. He's the founder of Man in the Mirror, a global ministry impacting thousands of churches and millions of men, and it's incredible. And I'm one of them. He's written 23 books, including Man in the Mirror, which has been cited as one of the 100 most influential Christian books of the 20th century. His latest book, which I
Almost
hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is titled From Broken Boy to Mended Man, a positive plan to heal your childhood wounds and to break the cycle. Pat, it's so good to have you with us.
Thank you, Steve, Kathy, Matthew, George, Jeremy. Wow, the whole crew's here.
John and everybody else.
John.
Pat, I get, there was, Gary Rupp. He was the man who put together the counseling program at Reform Seminary where I taught so long. He used to have a cartoon in his office, and he showed this gigantic auditorium, and you looked at it, and there are 2 or 3 people in the cartoon. One is sitting up front, and there are 2 in the back. And the caption read, "The Annual Convention of Children of Normal Parents." Man, this book is a mother lode. You can pretty much look at everybody you know, and that includes women, too. Men and women who have significant wounds from childhood. And I commend you for being vulnerable and authentic enough to tell us why you're so screwed up. Not everybody is willing to do that. Why is the topic so important right now?
Well, I want to start by saying thank you for having me. Steve was one of my professors when I went through RTS. I was a businessman. I did it over a 10-year period, but got a degree. And Steve was my homiletics professor. So if you like what I have to say today, you can thank Steve. And if you don't like what you hear today,
It's
well,
Pat's fault.
it's still Steve. It's
Still
still Steve. One of the most important things about Steve is he told me many years ago, and he's told me many times since, that he prays for me on a regular basis. And I have a handful of men that have done that for me. Doug Coe was one of them
Oh,
who have
man.
done that for me. That goes way back, doesn't it, Doug Coe? Yeah. And so it means a lot to me. And I have a one day a week that I set aside for prayer. And Steve, you were at the top of my
Oh,
list.
man, that means
as
more
well.
than you know. By the way,
Yeah, I've
if
tried
you-
to tell
if-
you.
if you're only praying once a week, you probably ought to increase that a little bit. Okay, tell us why this topic is so important now.
Well, it's hard to figure out exactly the best place to dive into this, but I want everybody to understand, if you're listening, this is not a book about me. This is really a book about you. But I've used my story as sort of a frame so we could be able to hang some big ideas along the way. And so the why for the book is that I grew up in a Christian home that didn't know Christ, if that makes any sense to you. My mom and dad, I'm pretty sure they wanted to do the right thing. My father was abandoned by his dad when he was 2 years of age, the youngest of four kids. And so my dad grew up in a home with a single mom. She did the best she could, but my dad had never felt the scratch of a father's whiskers, never heard a father reading him a bedtime story, never tossed a ball in the background, in the backyard, never had his hair tousled, never wrestled on the living room floor, never heard a truck door shut in the driveway at the end of the day, signaling that his dad was about to re-enter the family orbit. So he grew up, and what it meant to be a man was completely unexampled to him.
Mm.
So I think my dad, he got married, wanted to break the cycle. I'm the oldest of four boys, but it didn't work out for him. Lots of reasons for this. I quit high school in the middle of my senior year. My next brother, he followed in my footsteps. He eventually died of a heroin overdose. And my two youngest brothers have had way more than their fair share of struggles. And my dad just never saw it coming. I think if he was here today, he would say that he wanted to break the cycle, but nobody ever really took him under their wing and showed him the ropes on how to be a godly man, husband, and father. And so I grew up. I came when I left high school, ended up in the Army, extremely angry young man, chip on my shoulder, all the things you might expect. And so that all began to change. We can talk about this. That all began to change when, through the prayers of my wife and the influence of several young guys, I decided that I would, in desperation, surrender my life to Jesus Christ at the age of 24. And then things began to change. The whole process of me healing these childhood wounds took 28 years. I've figured out how you can do it in about 3 months if you really want to do it. And so I thought
That's what the book's about.
that would be useful to share.
You know, the interesting thing that I found when I was reading your book this morning was some bad things happened to you, but you were so kind in referring to your parents, especially your father. You even said in your mind's eye you could imagine sitting down with him when you write the book, and he would say, "You got it. This is how it happened." And as I read that, because I read a lot of books, and books written by children who have had screwed up parents and who are very angry about it. I was quite moved with your kindness and your mercy. And later on, we're going to talk about forgiving parents and the importance of that kind of thing. But you demonstrated that right on, and I just wanted to thank you for saying that.
Well, I appreciate it. It's important for everybody to understand these are not the rantings of an angry teenager who grew up to be an angry man and never processed his pain. I'm fully alive in Jesus. I'm really fully healed, and I God has brought about lasting and beautiful changes. Men, you can have those too, and so juxtaposing the difference between not wanting to throw my parents under the bus because I do love them, but then also we have this story to tell that could really be helpful to you.
And I appreciate the fact that you told the story. And you weren't overly detailed. There was not a lot of prurient interest. You could have sold more books if you had been just a bit more detailed about what went on and talked about the pain and the wounds in specifics. But you didn't do that, and I appreciate that you didn't do that too. Listen, I've got 1,000 questions, and everybody at this table does too. And we'll get to those when we get back. By the way, this is a good book. It's mainly for men. That doesn't mean that Kathy won't benefit by it and the other women who are listening or watching this program. The title of the book is From Broken Boy to Mended Man, a positive plan to heal your childhood wounds and break the cycle. And by the way, as Pat said, it's not a biography. It's a plan. It's a plan that really works. It's practical and can make a difference in your life. Don't go anywhere. Like Jesus, we're going to return. So glad you're here. We're talking with author Pat Morley, and his latest book is called From Broken Boy to Mended Man, and it's not a biography or autobiography. It's not one of those books. It's really a very practical plan that can make a difference in your life. From Broken Boy to Mended Man, a positive plan to heal your childhood wounds and break the cycle.
Pat, Steve just mentioned the word practical, and you had mentioned, hey, 3 months, and then the subtitle, positive plan. I'm like, you're hitting all the things for me, at least as a guy. You're like, okay, tactical. Okay, it's going to take this month. I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound just like, well, get in touch with the feelings that you don't like to be in touch with. You're like, no. This is a mission. And I'm like, all right, I can get into this. This is a play. So I love the approach on the thing. Wondered if you would drill down a little bit into the particulars. You talk about addressing childhood wounds. Are they just a big pile of wounds? Are there different kinds of them? What's our point of entry here on this thing?
Yeah. Well, your preface comment there is so true. I'm all about the practical, giving men the practical help that they have been looking for, the practical help that can get them where they want to go, very application oriented. I want to make sure we do everything theologically correct, if you will. But at the end of the day, I'm wanting to give men news they can use, something that they can hear and then go do something about it. So parenting it's a sacred right and privilege to invest in children and give them the right cocktail of love, structure, roots, and wings. And so if a young man, young woman for that matter, and I'm a men's author, so I know my lane, I just stick to my lane. But, obviously these are life principles, so women can read this book too, and some of the early readers are women, and they're getting have got a lot out of it. But if your parents, if you could say of my parents were affirming, or maybe my parents were encouraging, then you probably got the right cocktail of love, structure, roots, and wings. But if you didn't, then you would say one or more of 7 different things. My parents were passive, which would be true for me, and you could have one or more of these. My parents were absent. Maybe it's divorce, drugs. Maybe it's death or divorce, whatever the case. My parents were permissive. They let you have your own. You ran wild. You could do anything pretty much short of murder. And when my wife and I were dating, she said, I think your parents gave you too much say. That's very true.
So how many did you murder?
Well, I skipped all our part of 73 days in my junior year in high school before I quit in the middle of my senior year. So I'd say I was pretty conniving. The fourth one, my parents were enabling. So that's the definition of enabling is, parents are supposed to help their children do things they can't do for themselves, right? But when parents do things that the children can and should do for themselves or hold them accountable when they do things they shouldn't do, that's the definition of enabling. And so I've got a neighbor who has a couple of teenage kids. They knocked out the floodlights in another neighbor's house. And then the father defended his two kids. And of course, that's been a few years ago. And today, I mean, they're still just so messed up because of that enabling. And then my parents were angry. I had to walk around on eggshells. I never knew when my parents were going to blow up, if that's you. Or my parents were demanding. The guy that just put in my new fence, I gave him an advance copy of the book. And he said, I grew up in Auschwitz. He said, my dad was just so demanding, I could never do anything to make him happy. And then finally, my parents were belittling, like they just say things that make jokes at your expense, put you down, make fun of body parts, things like this, or say you'll never amount to anything, And so these are like 7 negative parenting styles that are in the book. And I give about a page and a half to each of those, not to dwell on it, but here's the thing. I'm all about solutions, but if you're trying to solve the wrong problem, you can only succeed by accident. So I do think it's important when you're setting up a book like this is let's make sure that we actually understand the problem that we're trying to solve. And so when figuring out your parents' parenting style is step 1. And then I give these 9 characteristics of broken boys in the book. Alcoholics Anonymous, they have their list. Adult children of alcoholics, they have their list. So I thought we needed our list too. So I spent a few years developing this list of these 9 characteristics of broken boys. And then I've got exercises in there to help men figure out, what of love structure, roots, and wings did they get or not get? And what of the 7 parenting styles did they get or not get? And then which of these 9 characters? So by the end of part 1, you really have a really good idea. Okay, now I know what happened to me. And now it's ready to go into a process of healing, which is part 2, and then break the cycle, which is part 3.
Gosh, this sounds so good. Yeah. Sounds like I should have encountered you a long time ago and read this book.
A long time ago, I would have been big trouble for you, trust me.
Pat, it is, as Matthew was saying, and you've been saying, it is very practically outlined and set up and so forth, well-suited for a small group, well-suited for individual study, questions and so forth. And so it's a very helpful approach in the way you've structured it. What about for guys maybe of different ages? Is it too late for some of us to even bother to get into this? Is it, ideally, of course, you get into it when you're younger, but is it too late for some of the old guys?
A fair question and a good question. So here's the deal. I started my journey towards healing. I became a follower of Jesus at the age of 24, began my journey of healing at the age of 25, although I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a kid, right? But my brother had been off at war. The family hadn't been together for several years. It was Thanksgiving dinner. I'm the oldest of 4 boys. My wife and I went out to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. And in our home, we did God is good, God is great, and we thank him for this food. Amen. And on this particular day, Dad said, I'd like to pray, and maybe we can pick that up on the other side.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's going to be a good story.
He's got better teasers than you do.
I know, that's true. Listen, if you turn off the dial on your radio or turn off your screen and you don't hear the rest of this story, your friends are going to say to you, you missed it. You missed it. I can't believe that you missed it. So don't go anywhere. The title of the book is From Broken Boy to Mended Man, a positive plan to heal your childhood wounds and break your cycle. And you do have wounds if you're human, and the cycle needs to be broken. So don't go anywhere. We're hanging out with Pat Morley. You can keep up with him at patmorley.com and on Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, at Patrick Morley. It's not creative, but you can remember it.
Pat, before the break, I had asked about whether or not this can be helpful to people of guys of even older ages, of all ages, ideally starting earlier, but at any age. And you were telling a story about Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and so a little circuitous answer, but it can start early. I was 25 years of age when I began the journey towards healing my childhood wounds. If it wasn't for my wife, I probably would have had no contact with my parents. At that point, I was doing Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, maybe Labor Day picnic, But this particular occasion was very special because now I'm at 25 years old. I've been a follower of Jesus for about a year. And my dad usually would say, God is good, God is great, and we thank you for this food, amen. And on this particular day, all four of my parents' sons were there at the table along with my wife. And my dad said, I'd like to pray today. And he started out, Lord, Mom and I would just like to say thank you. And then he started blubbering.
Oh, man.
And he excused himself and he went into the bedroom, and I went in after him and I said, Dad, are you all right? What's the matter? He said, yeah. I said, I'm okay. I just need to gather myself. It's just that your mother and I never thought that we would ever see our four boys together again.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And something softened in me that day. And I saw my dad in a different way. And I just unilaterally forgave him for everything. And then that began a process of healing that has been profound. Forgiveness is really the elephant in the room, It began a process. Now, if I would have had a counselor or a book like this or somebody to help me along the way, it took another 10 years for me to, for the very first time, hear the words, I love you. I grew up, I never heard the words, I love you. I never heard the words, I'm proud of you. We believe in you. Here's some things you might want to know about the opposite sex. Here's some things you might think about with regard to education or vocation. None of that. And we never hugged. I have no recollection of ever being hugged as a child. Now, I'm not so naive as to say those things never happened, but I do think it's significant that even today, and I'm 75 years old, that even today, I still have no recollection of any of those things happening. So, but 10 years later, when I was 35, that was the first time I ever heard the words, I love you. There's a story that goes with that. And then at 47, I was 47 years old before my dad said that he was proud of me. And, but these things were magic, they're electric. And then when my mom died, I got this great counseling from Lottie right there in your guys' offices. And and that was able to close the loop. So what I'm saying here is, in answer to your question, 25, 35, 47, 53. And guess what? I wrote the book a couple years ago. I started writing the book when I was 73. And oh my gosh, it's kind of like I relived this whole thing. And like, I've come to a whole new level that I didn't even know was possible by writing the book. So any age, whether you're 18 or 80, the core affections of the human heart are the same, male and female. And so that's why, whether you're 18 or 80, you can read the book of Ecclesiastes or the Sermon on the Mount, and it's going to speak to you. And I think that this book is probably going to do that too. I had a 77-year-old woman yesterday, a 77-year-old woman whose father, a mean, angry snake, died 7 years ago, and she's been tied up in bondage ever since and before. She read the book. She heard this teaching, the principle in the book. It's Jesus's principle on unilateral forgiveness. And she decided last week that she would unilaterally forgive her father. I saw her yesterday. She's a different person in her own words. She said she's totally been set free, but she just didn't have the practical help to get her where she knew she wanted to be. And so that's why this book really focuses on practical help.
Oh, man. Guys, it's obvious that that in an hour, there is so much good in this book, so practical and helpful without being overly religious and living the victorious Christian life stuff. This is just good, workable, practical material for your life. And on the other, we don't have any time in this break, but on the other side of the break, I want to, it's not easy to unilaterally forgive. I mean, what your friend did sounds like, oh, well, she said no big deal. It wasn't as easy as that. And so we're going to talk on the other side of the break about forgiveness. We could pursue 20 other subjects, but it, I guess, starts with forgiveness because it started with us with forgiveness. The name of the book, by the way, and it'd be a great book for a small study, From Broken Boy to Mended Man, a positive plan to heal your childhood wounds and to break the cycle. You might want to get this. You might want to recommend it to your friends. It is a life changer. Of course, I'm too old. And I love denial. So glad you're here. We're hanging out with Pat Morley, one of my favorite people. By the way, if you haven't yet subscribed to the weekly Key Life email, you're missing out. While you're thinking about it, go to keylife.org/subscribe. And it's free, so you can't complain, even if you don't like it.
Pat, you were talking about childhood wounds, and I think in certain circumstances, you hear about somebody's story, you're like, yeah, those parents were willfully making some bad choices, and I can see how that kid would immediately embrace the idea of, yeah, childhood wounds were imparted to me. But we're flawed human beings, and any parent, no matter how good they did or how hard they tried, in some ways, I think, still passes along certain wounds. Is that... would you say that's accurate in your view? And is that maybe kind of liberating to go, I don't have to say my parents were bad people, to go, yeah, I have some hurts that they passed along to me?
Yeah. So Terrence Gorski, who is an addictions expert, he estimates that 70 to 80% of all families in America are dysfunctional. Yeah. But here's the thing. So that means that you turn to the left or to the right, 7 out of 8 men that you beat are going to have grown up with some level of dysfunction. Now, here's the thing. My mom and dad were extremely nice people, and they really wanted to do the right thing. Whatever mistakes they made were out of ignorance, not malice. Now, there are some abusive parents. Maybe they're had neglected you emotionally, physically, or any number of ways, right? But the vast majority of parents really are trying to do the right thing. They just can't give what they didn't receive themselves. So, yes, the answer to that is definitely yes. I remember my parents, not any of the different steps of reconciliation and healing and so forth that I learned about as a believer and then went to them with them. They were always receptive, and it's almost like they wish that they had thought of it first. You see, yeah, I'm the first person in my family with a college education, that kind of thing. So they just weren't really book learners. We were part of a church that really didn't have a vision to disciple men. That's a part of the problem too. So when I told you about at 25, I forgave them. In my early 30s, I really started to have a yearning, maybe an ache to have more of a relationship with my dad. So, and this was really because of what I was learning about Jesus and family and love. And so I invited my dad to lunch on his birthday, and he said yes. And I was really happy about that. We went, had a great time. So we made that an annual tradition for the next several years. And then when I was 35 years of age, after we finished his birthday lunch, we were walking out to the parking lot, and our vehicles were parked next to each other by coincidence. My car, his truck, he was a working man. And I still can't explain, apart from maybe the Holy Spirit, but I said, Dad, as we're saying goodbye, I said, Dad, can I give you a hug?
Mm.
And I'm telling you, the words were not out of my mouth, and he was charging me like a grizzly bear. And he wrapped his arms around me, and he let out this deep, primordial groan. It must have lasted 20 seconds. And when he was done, we drew back from each other with our hands on our shoulders, and tears were rolling down our faces. And I said, I love you, Dad. And he said, I love you too, son.
Oh, man.
And that was the very first recollection that I have of hearing the words, I love you.
Oh gosh. And now you're turning
It
it to me.
transformed our family.
Wow.
What's that?
Really
I said
does.
now he's pointing at me to ask a question. God. This is probably these two statements that are in the book, Pat, in chapter 8 are probably but of course to most people, but I just need to tell you that these were just very significant when I read them. This is in the chapter, as you obviously know, How to Grieve What Should Have Been, and you said, grieving is the opposite of denial. If denial is trying to forget, grieving is trying to remember. Denial stores up pain, grieving lets it out. And I was like, okay, you know.
You just picked one of my favorite sentences in the whole book.
Oh my God. Well, guess what? Mine too. Anyway, so my question deals with the preceding chapter, chapter 7, how to overcome denial and face the truth. And in it, you give some, I'm not exactly sure whether you want to call it principles or whatever, about going in terms of going about facing your demons. And I just wondered, you talk about setting an overarching goal and that kind of thing. Could you just, we don't have a whole lot of time, but can you just kind of highlight that a little bit? Because I think sometimes people get to a point and say, okay, I'm ready to do this, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so throughout the book, from the beginning to the end, almost every chapter has different steps you should take,
Right.
should consider taking. Every chapter ends with reflection and discussion questions, so you can do them by yourself or in a small group. Denial is such a powerful force. And so when I was writing the book, I remembered that my my parents. So when I was in college, I raced motocross. My parents didn't come to my events as a child, little games, things like that. But for some reason, they came to watch one of my motocross races. And that happened to be the day that I was in a nasty crash and got flown to the hospital in a helicopter.
Wow.
Well, my parents did not come to the emergency room, and my parents never called to see how I was doing.
Oh.
Now, you would think that that would be a memory that would be so devastating that it would have ripped this young man apart and destroyed any possibility of self-esteem or self-confidence, right? But here's the thing, guys. Until I was writing this book, I literally had never remembered the fact that they didn't come to the ER or call to check up on me.
Oh,
Wow.
man.
That's how powerful denial is. Denial is, guys, if you're listening, denial is emotional amnesia. You literally can't forget. Your mind is so powerful. We can't stand the thought that we're not the gleam in our mother's eye. We're not the apple of our father's eye. And so we can't stand that. We can't tolerate that. And so instead we put that away into a place where not only is it compartmentalized, it's like forgotten.
Oh, Pat, I don't know where this hour's going. Thank you for taking time to be with us. And you guys, you got to get the book. I will testify that Pat is the real deal, and this book is going to change lives. Pat, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you, and God bless all your listeners.
Guys, we are going to come back, tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. Great time. George was saying off the air that Pat had included in the book a footnote to say this isn't just for normal two-parent situations. It's for single parents. It's for group situations. It's for all of us, those dysfunctions. You know, it's good to hear Pat. He's taken a long journey of a lot of years, and he's the real deal, and I've watched him for a lot of those years. I was reading an article this morning by a rabbi who had gone to a clergy meeting, and they were talking about how they were all gray-headed, and they needed to do something to attract young people that young people would like and come to their church or their synagogue. And the rabbi got up and said, "Youth sucks." He said, the only thing they should come to us for is to learn something. And I think Pat Morley gives a good example of that. You got to listen to him. If you listen to him soon enough, you'll spare yourself a boatload of trouble, because he's been there and he's done that, and he's got things that are important to say. And before we finish, let me also say that we're all screwed up. Me less than you. I'm ordained. But we really are. Life is messy. Families are messy. And I don't know a single exception to that. If you've been doing this as long as I've been doing it, it means a lot of people have allowed me into their stories and told me their secrets. And the thing that first amazes me when that happens is not you too. And it's a statement that can be made of everybody about everybody else, not you too. This is hard. And as C.S. Lewis said through Aslan, he said we must be kind to each other because it's not easy. So, good hour talking about some remedies that make a difference. Who's going to be on next week?
Do you know what next week is?
No.
Next week is Easter. So we're going to just be
We're
us.
going to have Jesus, right?
Boy, wouldn't that be something? We're just going to have us, and we're going to celebrate Easter, and we might even have some little
Hot
things to
cross
partake
bunnies.
of, and
great.
etc.
Are we going to do the Last Supper?
No. That would be Monday, Thursday.
Oh, okay.
It'll be the last.
Dummy.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
It'll be the pack your own lunch for the last.
The 5 loaves and 2 fishes.
Right, there you go.
Hey guys, we're out of here, but we're going to come back next week, same time, same place. Hope you'll join us then. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And it gives you a wide, wide berth.
Well, at least there's